Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the class of Management Accounting. So the last 2 weeks we already discussed about standard costing, but I'm going to try to review a little bit about that. So as we've learned before, standard costing is the cost accumulation method actually that would make the company predetermined amount that will be known as standard cost, right? So instead of recording cost at the actual amount of the company spent, so they are recorded using standard cost. So actually, that will be later in the process to match with the actual amount. So that's why very important to set the standard cost in the very beginning. The difference between the actual and the standard amounts known as a variance, right? So the variance is actually things that need to be analyzed and are very useful for decision making. Okay, so the standard cost actually may be based on historical data, past experiences, probably related to market averages or probably another sources of information. Okay, so okay, I'm just going to check whether there is information talk about what is the advantages of this standard cost. Okay, so let me just write it on the whiteboard first. Okay. All right, so actually I'm just going to review a bit about advantages of standard costing. Okay, so what could be the first one? So actually the standard costing, it will be emphasize control over the cost, right? So it will be control over the cost. Why? Because as we talked before, we need to analyze the variances, right? So the variances is actually closely related to standard cost and actual cost that will be provided for a very useful information for improving and also probably maintain the operational of the company, right? So the advantages of the standard costing, first one will be control of the cost, right? And the second one, the standard costing, it will be served as a key element in responsibility accounting. Why? Because actually in responsibility accounting, the manager need to evaluate it, right? So they need to evaluate the performance of the company, evaluate whether, whether they can control actually the costs that they make, right? So the actual performance is compared with the expectation, right? With the standard. Okay, so we have the standard and this is the actual one. So if probably the actual cost is higher than the standard that we set, so the management can, analyze something from that. So the second one is served as a key element or important in responsibility accounting. Accounting. Okay. So that was related for that, right? Because the manager would be, evaluate the performance of the company. So they want to know how they can control. So they know the standard, they know the actual, so we can, could be the guidance for them to establish the next standard cost. All right. So the third one, it will be support management by objective and management by exception. What is a management by objective and exception? So management by objective means that the approach when the manager and the subordinate want evaluated, it is evaluated based on the achievement of the set goals. Got it? So management by objective is actually where there is a manager and also subordinate or like employer. So they evaluate it based on achievement of the set goal. So if they set the goal, so whether the achievement has been completely achieved in the maximum way, so that focus on the management by objective. How about management by exception? This is actually another managerial approach, which the management give attention to matter that materially different from the standard, right? So that one is support management by objective and management by exception. Okay. So what is management by objective? It's actually the approach where the manager and also the subordinate are evaluated based on the achievement of the set goals, right? But management by exception is another managerial approach where the management give attention to things that actually different from the standard. Okay, right. So I hope you guys understand about this one. See the difference, right? So if management objective, you just focus on the achievement of set goal. So I'm just probably just going to highlight, all right? Management by objective will be is actually will be based on. So this is based on achievement of the set goals. But for management by exception, it will be, so this is actually closely about things, or you can say that matters, yes, the matters that different, or probably difference, and probably deviate from the standard. So that was different, right? So the third one is standard costing will be helped to promote efficiency among workers and also employees, right? So it will promote efficiency among workers and employees. Employees, correct. Well, yeah, so we can see that promotes efficiency among workers. So even though it's not perfect, but the standards set the acceptable amount of the cost to be sent, right? So even though probably when they set the standard cost, yeah, it's not really, based on the real situation, but this established standard will be set the amount that could be acceptable, amount of cost that could be acceptable to spend, right? So this will be, you get the idea about how efficient workers and also employees in this term. Right, so the next one is it will be simplifies and also speeds up the recording process, so especially when the actual cost data are not readily available. Right, so it will be make simple, simplifies and speeds up recording process. Right, so this is actually when the actual cost data are not readily available. Okay, so these all are advantages of the standard costing. I'm just going to close it back. Okay. Right, so things that, the difference that happens between the actual and the standard cost is actually known as a variance, right? So there are two kinds of variance in here. I mean, not type of variance, but the familiar with things. I mean, what is the meaning of the variance itself? So the first one is a favorable variance. So the favorable variance, right? So okay, so this is just going to write in here. Okay, so it'd be favorable variance and also unfavorable variance. What do you mean by favorable one? So the favorable variance happened when the actual costs are less than a standard cost. But unfavorable variance will be occurs when the actual cost higher than the standard cost. So see the difference? So what can we say that when the variance is favorable when the actual cost is actually less than the standard cost. So the actual one, so the actual cost will be less than the standard cost. So more or less like that. Okay. Yeah. So how about the unfavorable one? Unfavorable one is when the actual cost, it will be higher than the standard one. Okay, so this is the difference of the favorable and also the unfavorable variance. Right. So how actually the sequence, so actually the standard costing and also variance analysis will be start from company have to establish a standard first, and also the next one they have to measure the performance, the actual performance of the company itself. So after they know the actual performance, they will compare the actual performance with the established standard. After they know it, and then analyze the variances and also investigate whether there is, there is a material that have deviation. And the next one, take the corrective action. Right. So sometimes a company probably can set the standard too high or probably too low or probably not applicable anymore in the current situation. So in that case, the standards need to be revised. Okay. So actually standard costing system will be also going to be used for the terms that related to the job order costing and process costing, right? So the standard, so the standard have to, so it will be established for material and probably for labor, right, and factory overhead. This is the very important thing, okay? And I think we've also discussed before, right, between the actual cost system and normal cost system. So in the actual cost system, the manufacturing cost, all the manufacturing cost is recorded at the actual cost. But in the normal costing system, the material and also the labor are recorded at the actual cost, while the factory overhead is recording using the standard cost. So in the full standard cost system, material and also labor, that all of them are recorded in the standard cost. But the variance is actually recording later in the accounting process, right? So the financial statements will still reflect the actual cost incurred. So the explanation about, okay, I'm just gonna erase all the drawing, okay? So things that we got from the standard costs above is this one, right? So this is actually the standard, talking about the standard is actually the measurable, acceptable, the measure of performance, right? So the actual we compare with the standard and the differences or the variances are investigated. So this will make, will help manager to perform better, in the future, right? Especially when they want to manage the cost. Okay. Right. So one thing we have discussed before. So actually, there is a quantity standard and also the cost standard. The quantity standard is actually the acceptable unit of the raw materials and the labor hours that used to produce a product or probably want to provide services. So the factory overhead is often measured based on machine hour and also direct labor hour. I think if you guys done before, right, in the cost accounting, but I hope everyone still remember about these things. Okay. So the cost standard is actually referred to the acceptable price that's spent for the required quantity. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to review whether I'll put that or not. Okay, standard cost, yes. Okay. So let's have a look at this one first. Okay, so this is actually already jumping to, I don't think it's not really detailed in this book, but I'm going to go back to the whiteboard, okay? I'm going to go back to that and okay, let's move. And no, it's okay. So as I talked before, is actually there are direct material standard cost. First, we're going to okay. Start with the standard cost itself. So the standard cost of the direct material is actually the total cost of materials that require to produce a unit of product or provide unit of services, right? So actually the total cost of material right? So that require to produce a unit of a product or probably want to provide the services. Okay. And how to compute this one? So we compute by multiply the standard cost of the unit or raw material by the standard quantity that required to produce a product. So for example, this one. Okay, I'm just going to move it here. So for example, there are this one, okay. So there are widget, or probably 5 blue widget. So the 5 blue widget needed to produce, it will be need to produce product A. Okay. I don't know why, but wait. Okay, I'm just going to move to this one. All right. So, based on the past experience, the company has determined the standard cost 2.50 per blue widget. Right. Hence, the standard cost of direct material per unit to produce produce a product is the 5 units of blue widget times 2.5 standard cost, right? So they set the standard cost of very long 2.50 per blue widget. So what become the the consideration of the company they want to set standard is actually probably the past experience, or it's probably things that happened in the past, so they know the price already. So based on this one, we can calculate the standard cost of the direct material. Standard cost, I'm just gonna do this standard cost for direct material. That will become 5 units, right? So 5 units needed times with 2.50. So, okay, so that was the type, an example of a direct material standard cost. Okay. Right, so let's just try to clear this one first. Now we'll have a look. The direct labor standard cost. So this is a direct material. Now we move to the second one is the second one is a direct labor cost. So what is direct labor? So actually the standard cost of a direct labor is about the total cost of labor required to produce a unit of the product. So, got it? So the total cost of labor required to produce a unit of a product. Okay. Why is it moving? Right. So, how can we compute it? So we multiply the standard rate of an hour of the direct labor by standard hours required to produce one product. So for example, 1.5 labor hours needed to produce a unit of product A. Right? The standard cost per labor hour is $8. So how about the standard cost of the direct labor itself? So the standard cost it will be 1.5, right? So 1.5 hours will be times $8. So they got 12. Okay, so the third one is a factory overhead standard cost. So the factory overhead standard cost is actually the factory overhead. Yeah, for the factory overhead, we can divide it into two types. It's variable factory overhead. And the second one is fixed factory. Okay. So, how about the standard cost for the variable one? So the variable factory overhead computation, it will be using the same one as a direct labor. And the variable factory overhead standard is actually often computed based on direct labor hour or the machine hour. Okay, so the standard cost or the fixed cost is just actually expressed in the total amount of the given level of production. So, but this one is actually the same computation as a direct labor, right? But for the fixed one, for the fixed factory overhead, for the fixed factory overhead, it's when the company just want to express it. So it's based on the total amount, right? Total amount. Okay. So that was the three standard cost, type of standard cost, right? So now let's have a look at the variance analysis. Okay, so we jump from the definition first. So variance analysis is actually compare between actual and also standard costs. So okay, so the actual one, okay, are compared with standard cost. Okay. So the example will be like this. The company A want to produce a 1,000. So they produce 1,000 units of product A. And they spend around $50,000 for direct material. So if the total standard cost of the direct material is 12,500, if the total, so just gonna totals. So if the total standard cost is actually of direct material, all right? Just going to complete it. It's 12,500, right? So what would be happening here? The company, produced 1,000 units and spent 15,000 rupiah for the direct materials. But the standard cost set by the company is actually 12,500. So what actually happening here? So it means there is around 2,500 difference, right? Okay, so difference is 250. So this one, the actual one, the actual is 15,000. Standard is 12,000. So the difference will be 2,500, right? So the question now, is it a favorable or unfavorable one? Yeah, that was unfavorable, or probably sometimes people just write view or unfavorable. Why is it unfavorable? Because the company set the standards only 12,500, but the real one is actually 15,000. So it means that they have the unfavorable analysis, right? So based on this situation, it means that the variance has to investigate what is actually the max the costs, right? So probably there is a higher purchase price of the raw material, and it could be because the quantity used has been increased, right? So that was kind of the example. Okay, so right. So now let's move this one. Okay, so here we go. Have a look. So this is one type we talked before: direct materials, direct labor, and also overhead. So this is standard price, standard usage, standard cost. Okay. So now we have to this one, the variance analysis. We've done it before, right? Discuss a little bit about variance analysis. So the flexible budget can be used to identify the costs that should have been incurred for the actual level of activities. Right. So how to get it? So by multiply the standard unit price. So standard price is actually standard unit price, and standard quantity will be lawful actual output. So now let's have a look. The actual price is AP, and also standard price, standard quantity. Right, so the actual quantity. The actual quantity that used, right? So the actual price per unit of the input. Now let's have a look at the price and efficiency variance. Okay, so for the favorable and unfavorable one, I think you guys already got the idea about this one, right? So now let's have a look the price variance. So what could be the basic information for this one? So if talking about price variance, so that will be happened when there is a difference between the purchase price of raw material, all right, while the quantity arises from the difference in the quantity of raw material that actually used and also expected to be used. Okay, so this one, the total budget variance is simply the difference between the actual and also the input and also the planned cost. So this is a total budget variance, actual price times the actual quantity, and standard price minus standard price times the standard quantity. Okay, so the total variance itself can be break down into price and also the usage variance, right? So let's have a look at this one. What is the price variance? Is actually the difference between the actual and the standard unit price of the input multiplied by the number of input is used. Okay, so this one, the actual price minus standard price times the actual quantity. And also the usage variance is difference of the actual and standard quantity input, right? So multiply with the standard unit price of the unit. So in the price variance, we times with the actual quantity here, right? So for the usage variance or efficiency variance, we times with the standard price in here. So see the difference, right? So that's why if you want to know the total variance between the price variance and also the usage variance, we can just, the formula comes from this one. Okay, so it's up to you wants to calculate with whatever way. Okay, so for example, the price variance. So the price variance, the actual price is around 2. Okay. So for the price variance, for example, the price variance, probably. So what is the formula for the price variance? Is actually actual price and then minus the standard price and with the actual quantity. Okay, so the actual price now we can assume it's around 2.4. Sorry, all right. And the standard price we can assume it's around 2.50. Okay, right. So the quantity, the actual quantity around 32,000. So we've got 3,200. So what happened in here? The actual price is actually, lower than the standard price. So based on this situation, for example, the price is actually, we can see that it's favorable, right? Because we set the standard 2.5, but the actual one is only 2.4. So that's why we got favorable here. Okay, so that's how the sequence would work. And the second one is the quantity variance. Variance. So what is the formula for this one? The actual quantity itself, yeah, because this is because for example, so because this is the variance of the price, so that's why we have to using this formula. But if we want to know the quantity variance, so what sort of thing that we're going to calculate? Of course, the quantity itself, right? Or the standard quantity itself. Okay, so the quantity itself also, I hope no one will be questioning about this one because quantity variance is actually same with the usage variance, right? So I can probably just gonna say it's usage variance. So I think quantity variance will be easier. So the variance between the quantity, right, will be time with the actual price. Okay. Sorry, it's time with the standard one. With the standard one, sorry. Right, so with the standard one. So, for example, the quantity variance, the actual quantity is actually 32,000, right? So they say that because we know the actual quantity first. And minus the standard quantity. So the standard quantity is actually 30,000, right? And times with the standard price. Standard price is 25. So where is the amount? So what can we say from this one? Quantity variance or usage variance. The actual quantity is actually 32,000, right? But this is actually the standard quantity of input, right? So the standard quantity is only 30,000. So what do we mean by this one? It means that there is an unfavorable variance in here, right? Because the standard is less than the actual. Or probably the actual is higher than the standard. Okay, so this is how the sequence works. Okay, so based on this one, we can calculate. So let's have a look. The unfavorable variance occur whenever at the actual price or the usage price are greater than the standard one. Right. Okay, this one. Probably that was for the price, or probably for the usage, or probably for the quantity. Okay. So if the quantity is greater than the standard one, so it means the variance is unfavorable. So please do familiar with this one. Okay. Okay, so this is the one that I highlight in here. So when the opposite occurs, when the favorable variance obtains, it's actually happened when the actual price are less than, right, the standard price. Right, so like this. So the favorable one is actually the opposite. They say that they didn't make the explanation, but just say opposite to this one. Okay. Now, but the favorable and also unfavorable are not equivalent to good or the bad parents. Okay. So some people say that probably they think that this is a good one, this is a bad one. No, it's not. You cannot represent it to become like that. So it just indicates the relationship of the actual and also the standard and the quantity. So whether the variants are good or bad, it actually depends why they occurred. Okay, so determining why require manager to do some investigation. Okay. All right, so let me just clear our drawing test in here. Okay. Now, so it will be, best on decision of the manager, right? So decision to investigate. So, the actual performance actually very rarely meet this exactly best standard set because management doesn't expect it to be. So the variation randomly it's around standard that was expected. Because of this one, manager will have a mind and get to range performance. So when the variance are within this range, so they assume to be caused by the random factors. When the variance falls outside this range, so probably there's a deviation that likely to be caused by non-random factors. Okay. So this is just about how can we get the formula from this one. So the actual times the actual quantity, right? So all of these things are different. We got the price variance, and then this one got usage variance, right? So this one is a budget. Put the budget variance from all of them. Okay. All right. So actually, well, the company wanted to set the standards. That was very ethical implication, right? So, yeah. So I'm just going to probably want to do okay, this one. So let's just read this illustration together. So the few examples from the pharmaceutical industry may drive home the importance of the variance investigation. So a drug must contain a certain amount of the active ingredient plus or minus a small percent, right? So that would be half, around 19 and 110%. So the FDA is responsible for ensure the safety and also the efficacy of the drug at the home and abroad. Okay, so the anonymous letter alert the FDA to manufacturing problems with the antibiotic produced by the Canadian firm. So basically, the drug was too strong and probably can destroy the bacteria with the harmful. So beneficial bacteria will be erased by the harmful bacteria. So based on investigation, open European investigation, the FDA found the blending process to be out of control. So the result was that the firm stopped shipping that drug until the process could be corrected. So another investigation center in China, so the FDA found the samples of the anti-leukemia drug to be too weak. So again, the larger variances from the standard triggered investigation. So interestingly, the question of what to do about the company and the drug wasn't clear cut. So the FDA didn't withdraw its approval because the drug is just a very short supply. So now we can get the illustration why the variance investigation is important, because we need to understand when to investigate. So investigating the cause of the variance, also taking the corrective action, like activities, and managers have to, consider whether the variance occur or probably occur at the same time as before, right? Okay, so this is just about how do managers determine whether variants are significant. So how is the acceptable range established? Acceptable range is actually standard plus or minus an allowable deviation, right? So there is a range, yes, but there is an acceptable one, that between the standard and also between the allowable deviation. So the deviation probably could be happened, right? So, but there is a range to set it. So what do we call that? We call it control limit.
It's 1 hour.
For example, like this, standard is 100, right? So standard is 1. The allowable deviation is plus 10,000 and minus 10,000. So the upper limit is actually 110,000. Lower limit is 90,000. So investigation will be occurs whenever observation fell outside of this limit. See, so if there is things that outside of the limit, so the investigation will be occur. Okay. And the control sometimes expressed in percentage of standards and also in dollar. So for example, the allowable deviation may be expressed as the lesser 10% of the standard amount. So management will not accept a deviation more than 10,000, even if the deviation is less than 10% of the standard. Right. Okay, so that was actually how our management wants to, wants to know whether the investigation occur. Right. So the next one, I'm going to continue with the second video.